Welcome to the Vital Spirit podcast. I'm Dr. Kelly Livingston, a naturopathic physician and your guide to a new health reality, one that connects body, mind, and spirit. Together, we'll dive deep into the art and science of holistic healing. Through working with hundreds of women through midlife transitions, I've discovered something profound. Most of our physical and emotional challenges are rooted in a maladaptive stress response. And true healing begins when we regulate our nervous system. Each episode will explore complex health topics in simple, empowering ways, uncover the deeper wisdom within each of us, and share practical tools for nervous system regulation to help you awaken your vital force and create lasting wellness. So, if you're ready to reconnect with yourself, your health, and your purpose, let's begin this journey together so you can experience life more fully human and deeply healed. Hi, and welcome back to the Vital Spirit podcast. I'm Dr. Kelly Livingston. In the last few episodes, we've explored how inflammation affects the brain and how anxiety is often related to the gut-brain axis. Today, we're shifting a little bit deeper into the psycho-spiritual dimension of healing. This is really at the heart of the Vital Spirit method, and I've only had a small amount of time to touch on this. So we often start with the body, with the physical realm of existence, I like to say to patients. We're going to start with labs, looking at gut health. Remember, the gut-brain axis is pillar one of the Vital Spirit method. We're going to start opening up a conversation around hormones, maybe around nutrient deficiencies. And yes, those are essential. But the longer I practice and the more I see patients, the more I see that symptoms in midlife aren't just biochemical. They're soul signals. They're invitations or archetypal portals. And that's what today's episode is all about. So that can be a little bit overwhelming when you first enter into holistic medicine, and especially at midlife when you have a lot of other things going on. So let's start with what we know. We've had some in-depth conversations around the gut-brain axis, around the HPA, hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, or your stress response. We've talked all about vagal tone. We know that these systems carry emotion, they regulate stress, and they translate that felt sense of safety into physiology, into biology in our body. But these axes don't just process food and hormones, they metabolize our human experience. They digest our emotions and they store memory. They're truly the intersection of mind and body. And that's why I founded the Vital Spirit method and really rooted that methodology in the gut-brain axis and the HPA axis. It was how I could translate some of the deeper spiritual work that I wanted to get moving toward with patients into a biochemical pathway or physiology or process that we could test, we could monitor, we could track, while we're also opening up the conversation around things that are a little bit deeper or maybe haven't been addressed yet or thought about as contributing to the physical experience or to the symptoms that that patient has been experiencing. You can go back and listen to our previous episode on polyvagal theory, but I found that polyvagal theory really gave me a language or a clear window into understanding these processes and articulating that to patients so that you can understand exactly what's going on. So say, for example, we're stuck in that dorsal vagal freeze or shutdown state, and we feel numb or depressed, dissociated. We might feel really low energy, kind of cut off. Or we're stuck in sympathetic mobilization, that fight or flight state, and it might feel like a spiritual crisis, this constant human doing, not ever just being, or integrating the doing and mobilization, right? Never having time to rest, relax, play, connect with others. And this is where I do like to try to bridge body and spirit. In mind, body, spirit healing, we have to try to find places where we can communicate the connection between those two and articulate that to patients in a way that feels accessible and that then translates into, okay, well, Dr. Kelly, what am I going to go home and do about this? What does this really have to do with my health or my daily habits? So, yes, nervous system states are wonderful to have the language around, not just as clinical markers, but as really energetic landscape. So, I might talk about what's energetically depleting or renewing a patient and how that contributes to nervous system dysregulation or to emotional flexibility. And when a patient is ready, the next level of healing often means asking, what is my soul trying to say through this symptom? How can I get my body into a healing state? Yes, we're going to look at labs. We're going to optimize our health through diet and lifestyle. But now what else can I hear my soul trying to say to me? And what other message are these symptoms trying to convey to me other than just my ferritin is low? So we go a little bit beyond the physical plane. So, yes, ideally, we have worked on our physical body and removed some obstacles to cure, right? I talked in one of my first episodes about how Marion Woodman saw perimenopause and menopause in this transitional phase of life as an alchemical initiation. So, the symptoms that show up in midlife, the rage, insomnia, panic, new anxiety, or return of anxiety and depression you had when you were younger but haven't had in a while, the tears that are unprompted. These are not failures. They're not breakdowns, but they're really calls to transformation. We touched on this in a couple of the first episodes. So sometimes this can feel like the beginning of a descent or a journey inward. And I find that many women are experiencing phases in life where there's a lot going on. They're not only taking care of their own health and themselves, but children, maybe aging parents, and some old masks start to fall. So the roles and identities that maybe got you this far don't fit anymore. Maybe you have to prioritize and set boundaries and say no more often. And that tension, as those masks fall, or as you kind of really are touching, going inward and realizing what it is that you need or need to speak up about, it can show up as anxiety. It can show up as depression. So the episodes I did on the gut-brain axis contribution to anxiety and inflammation's contribution to depression were to start to introduce you to, yes, some of those physical obstacles to cure that we will work through. But I really think that there can be this spiritual communication essentially that is happening during this time. And at first, I don't want to reach for suppression with a patient. Yes, I absolutely want to help a woman who is experiencing anxiety or depression, but I really also want to guide them to start listening to what is that symptom trying to tell you? What else might be going on here? What does this anxiety need to say? What does your body refuse to hold on to any longer? And the thing that I think is really powerful and helpful is that this descent or this journey is archetypal. So you're not alone. You're not the first one to have done this. There are patterns, there's a map, but essentially your heroine's journey or your kind of descent into this process often begins with you losing your map so you can find your own inner compass. So although a guide, an elder, a healthcare practitioner you trust, they are key and essential, but it's really only you that can do that inner work of listening. You really have to start listening to that inner compass. And oftentimes it's through this stage of life that maybe we have been looking for external validation and we have been relying too much on messages from the outside, and we have to get really clear with that inner dialogue. Oftentimes, to understand midlife symptoms, we do need to trace back to the roots of unresolved stress. Remember, trauma is not the event, it's not just what event happened, it's how your nervous system processed it or didn't process that stressor. It's how your nervous system then responds and then further takes that stressor and it influences how it's going to process future stressors and respond to stress on a daily basis as it comes your way. So many women will notice that there's a resurgence of old patterns during midlife. This is not a regression. It's not a going back, but I will often hear women say, I thought I already dealt with that, or I feel like I'm going backward. And I will try to reframe that conversation into a conversation around how the body might finally feel safe enough to express what it could not express earlier in life. So you might have a resurgence of symptoms or remembering of a traumatic experience at this phase of life. Usually within a first visit, I am at least touching upon what was childhood like for your nervous system? How was your nervous system formed? And I will ask patients to reflect back, and you can do the same as you follow along. So, when in your life did you feel afraid or unseen or unloved? There tends to be a core wound or experience that informs our nervous system state for our future. You can think back on what some of the emotional imprints of your childhood or adolescence might have been. What were some of the themes or emotional experiences that you worked through when you were younger? Certainly, what adverse childhood events might have conditioned your stress response. Just starting to think back on that. And really, this is not about blaming that experience or blaming someone who maybe harmed you or hurt you in any way. However, it is about understanding that that experience then kind of rewired your stress response or your nervous system response that certainly can translate into future symptoms, both physical and mental. And this isn't about blame. This is about freedom from these wounds. So when you can link a symptom like a panic attack or chronic fatigue to an earlier unmet need or unresolved fear, then you begin to move out of reactivity to this wound, and you can move from a place of response. And really understanding our nervous system state holds the key to this. I think that by gently naming these origin wounds and the nervous system state that you're prone to moving into because of them holds the key. And you can do some of this work through journaling, somatic work, therapeutic support, and then these wounds of the past begin to lose their grip a little bit. So this is a great time to have conversation around different types of therapy, right? So while we explore energy medicine and archetypes, I do think there's a crucial need to work skillfully with the mind itself. So the soul cannot fully express itself when the mind is in constant chaos or reactivity. Remember, when we're scanning the environment for safety or danger, we're not exactly thinking about how to self-actualize or what our soul purpose is. So this is where I really find that therapeutic modalities can be essential, and this is not one size fits all. I'm going to list a few that I've found throughout the years can be really supportive in patient journeys to support more of this deep integration work. And I certainly help patients and guide them into a style of therapy that might be the best fit for them and for their health goals and the things that they're integrating or processing. So, some of the ones that I might refer patients out for would be EMDR, internal family systems work, family constellation therapy, somatic experiencing, and then all of the ACTs, DBTs, CBT for more cognitive emotional skills. So, again, it really is not one size fits all. And the goal is not to override emotions. It's not to not ever have a negative feeling or a bad day or bad experience, but it's really to become more aware of the mind's terrain so that that deeper emotional, energetic work can land. So again, if your mind is constantly busy and you're constantly scanning the environment for danger, not only is your body potentially not getting into that healing state because you're always in sympathetic mobilization, but you're certainly not just getting quiet and tapping into your soul's message or mission, right? And as I'm working with patients through this process, this is the phase where our tools might shift a little bit. So maybe I had used homeopathy or gemotherapy or flower essences initially, and we're still using herbs and nutrients and food as medicine, but I'll really add in a lot of subtle medicine work as I'm working with patients in more of the psycho-spiritual realm. So I certainly might be incorporating gemotherapies, again, homeopathy for emotional coherence and flexibility. I might be using flower essences some more in this phase. I had a great visit with a patient yesterday, actually, and she was asking if I had any experience with flower essences. And I had right on my desk my Bach book and a guide to the flower essences. And I thought it was so wonderful that she had asked that because I had pulled it out earlier for someone else. And so it was sitting here right on my desk. And I said to her, it can be as simple as flipping through the catalog and seeing what remedy do you resonate with. You can just look at the pictures and see what you're drawn to. You can certainly read through some of the characteristics of each remedy and see what resonates with you, what you think you might need to be working on, or what physical symptom you're experiencing or emotions that you're processing. So it's a wonderful way to start working with more of that energetic spiritual realm of healing even on your own. So, as you might be looking through a flower essence catalog and thinking, what resonates with me right now? That resonance is the beginning of reconnection with some inner knowing and inner truth. So, before we dive even deeper, let's pause for a moment. And I do want to define what I mean by an archetype. So, when I'm speaking about archetypes and patterns, we're all on the same page. So, in Jungian psychology, an archetype is a universal pattern of energy or behavior that lives in the collective unconscious. So, these patterns show up across cultures and time periods as characters or motifs, or sometimes you'll think of them in symbolic ways. They might be internal voices that shape how we see ourselves and the world. And they're not just roles that we play, but they're really energies that we embody. So, some archetypes that you might be familiar with would be the mother, the warrior, the healer, the mystic, the addict. We each carry a unique blend of archetypes, and some are more well developed than others, and others might be more dormant or disowned. And all of them really shape our perceptions and our relationships, our patterns throughout life, and our choices. And this is often unconscious, or most of the time it is unconscious until we've done some of this work. So, bringing archetypes into consciousness gives us a mirror to see ourselves more clearly, and we can really navigate and map the transformation that we would like to achieve, especially through midlife, with more grace and power. So, let's say we are struggling with really low energy and fatigue through this transition. We certainly will begin with terrain health and healing, right? We will ask questions around blood sugar, gut health, nervous system tone, but then we're also going to ask, what emotions have I been resisting, or what has been emotionally draining me? What part of me maybe wants to be heard more that I haven't been speaking out about? What early experiences might this symptom echo? Did I have a time previously where I felt emotionally and physically drained and so low as I do now? And you can use, for example, the Seeds of Health journal that I've created, and you can carve out time every day. It doesn't have to be a long time, but even a few minutes to do an exercise, such as looking through a flower essence catalog or looking up some of the resonant characteristics of that plant medicine that you might really be drawn to or interested in. And you can ask yourself, what flower essence calls to me? You can ask yourself, what dreams return over and over? What are some themes that come to me in my dreams frequently? Where in my life do I need to reclaim power? Where have I given my power away? Very often, the healing process comes down to where you place your power. Is it internal or is it external? So maybe you are working with a therapist through this process, but also doing some inner work on your own. So, some tools that I like to mention to patients are things like human design, using tarot. I love Gretchen Rubin's Four Tendencies. So, essentially, the point is that the more you understand your patterns, your motivations, the themes essentially that you have had in your life, the more that you can step into your power and change the things that are no longer serving you. For some women on this path, the call for transformation includes working further with plant medicines and psychedelics. Whether in clinical settings or ceremonial contexts, these experiences offer powerful insights into these unconscious patterns, ancestral imprints, and soul level truths. But these are not shortcuts. Psychedelics are amplifiers, and they will bring up what is already there. So without preparation and integration, they can overwhelm the system and create confusion. I actually wrote my thesis in medical school in 2013 on psychedelics use in the therapeutic relationship before this was kind of booming and being researched. So I'm so excited on all the work that's been done since then. But I really always highly recommend taking this quite seriously, in the sense that integration is really, really key, journeying and preparation beforehand with grounding practices, nervous system regulation, intention setting, a particular diet leading up to the experience, post-journeying support with somatic therapy, journaling, flower essence work, community and connection and sharing through the integration process, and certainly working with trained facilitators or integration coaches that understand both the neurobiology and the spiritual aspects of some of these transformational journeys. So I'm sure I'll have more episodes on that, but these expanded states of consciousness really do need to be held within a safe container. Set and setting is key. Your intention behind the experience is key. They are not a cure, but they can be a catalyst for sure. And whether you're utilizing plant medicine or any therapeutic relationship, the key is that healing happens in relationship. Remember, we talked all about co-regulation, and we have this biological imperative to connect. So whether it's with a therapist, a practitioner, in a woman's group, connecting with a trusted friend, these sacred spaces are really necessary to feel safe, to let go, to ask for support. We really don't heal alone. And I think that reclaiming our village is part of this journey in midlife. And it might look a little different than it did when we were younger, but finding a safe container for connection can be really integral to this process. Because this process can feel dark and scary, if a woman has not gone through a spiritual awakening before, I do like to educate a little bit around some terminology. For example, like, what is the dark night of the soul, right? And so what we call symptoms might actually be a profound shift or a dark night of the soul. And this term is rooted in mystical and depth psychological traditions, and it refers to a period of time where there's a lot of psychic and spiritual upheaval, when the old self is really dissolving and the new self has not yet formed. So this might be your first time in this territory through perimenopause and menopause, or it might be second, third spiral through the deep personal transformational work. And each time it might look different. And each time you might utilize different tools to get through the process. But it always asks for you to let go of a certain identity, and certainly to let go of what maybe once felt stable, comfortable, safe, and make room for something new. And that can feel really scary. So I did formulate the Vital Spirit method to serve as a container for this process, because I think it is a very sacred threshold. And so our work is to hold the nervous system steady and able to regulate in a healthy way through the process, to cultivate inner safety through ritual regulation practices, and to provide a compassionate container for the shadow work or excavation of some of these deeper truths or more uncomfortable topics, patterns, and things that you'd like to change and move through your midlife and beyond. So one of the more accessible ways to do some of this work I've shared with you before, and that is some of Carolyn Mace's work on sacred contracts. And so I am going to read a small section from this. So essentially, you're all familiar with archetypes. Like everyone's, well, maybe not everyone, but most of us have read a fairy tale, right? And so a lot of these archetypes you might be familiar with from some fairy tales that you read even when you were a kid. So again, I mentioned some of them earlier, but that might be caregiver, warrior, seeker, mystic, queen, wounded healer. I'm going to read you the damsel archetype. And some of the questions that you can ask yourself when you do this work are: which archetypes dominate your life historically? Which are underdeveloped? Which are you maybe afraid to embody or give power to? And this is such a great tool for transformation, not just for yourself to kind of reveal yourself to yourself, but also you can start looking at other people through the lens of archetypes. And it really lends itself to having more compassion for others on their journey, certainly more understanding of maybe some of their behaviors that you couldn't understand before. So anyway, I'm going to read a little bit of damsel. So the damsel in distress may be the oldest female archetype in all of popular literature and the movies. She was always beautiful and vulnerable and in need of rescue, specifically by a knight, and once rescued is taken care of in lavish style. When disappointed, a damsel must go through a process of empowerment and learn to take care of herself in the world. The shadow side of this archetype mistakenly teaches old patriarchal views that women are weak and teaches them to be helpless and in need of protection. It leads a woman to expect to have someone else who will fight her battles for her, while she remains devoted and physically attractive and concealed in the castle. Many women still expect to marry a man who will give them a castle and take care of them, and some men are raised to expect to do this. So this goes on and on. So you can see there might be some pros and cons to that, right? But starting to recognize maybe where you've placed your power and what archetypes have played a role in your life can also help you to take that power back through this process, right? So, through this process and spiritual awakening, you're really coming home to yourself. It's a process of deprogramming and unmasking and starting to see what is true and what serves you on this journey. Through this process, healing becomes spiritual embodiment and symptoms become soul messages, not just nuisances that we want to suppress. So, I want to leave you with some of the work of Edward C. Whitmont. He was a Jungian analyst and homeopath, and I use his book, The Alchemy of Healing, Psyche and Soma, all the time. It's a really profound lens on the intersection of soul and body. Whitmont wrote that symptoms are not just malfunctions, they are expressions of the soul in distress. They carry symbolic messages from the unconscious that point to unresolved emotional and spiritual dynamics. So, in other words, illness is not just a biochemical event. It's a psycho-spiritual communication. It's a request from our soul to be heard, to be seen, to be integrated. So, yes, we certainly need to rule out those physical root causes, and we might need to do some work on our mind, our mindset, quiet that monkey mind. But essentially, this is a much deeper spiritual process of unlearning and coming home to self. So when a patient comes into my clinic, I'm not just asking, why do you have fatigue? Why are you tired? What's wrong with you, right? What can I diagnose you with? What overgrowth does your gut have? What viral load? And of course, I am still asking those things. I am still ruling out those physical root causes, but I'm also asking what sacred message is hiding in your symptoms? What nervous system state created these symptoms? What patterns throughout life created the foundation for these symptoms to occur? In that book, Whitmont describes healing as an alchemical process, a transformational journey that requires both patient and practitioner to participate in the unfolding mystery. And this is one of the things that I love so much about what I do for a living, that true healing involves a reordering of the psyche, a symbolic death and rebirth that restores wholeness. I will never get bored with this work because every patient has a unique journey and it is a mystery and there is an art to it that we use along with all of the science. And I just think that's so beautiful. It's something that holistic medicine provides to women through midlife that I don't think a lot of other modalities can. So, in order to support the reordering and reorganizing of not only our physical hormones, for example, but our psycho-spiritual existence, we have to have a container of compassion and curiosity. We have to ask questions. We have to hold a container of safety for this process to occur. And I think we need to recognize the symbolic dimension of physical experience too. So, we have to essentially become more fluent in the body's metaphysical language. I know I've mentioned Louise Hay's work before, but essentially every time you have a physical symptom, you can also associate that physical symptom with an emotional or spiritual experience that your essentially soul might be trying to communicate to you. And this is why it's really important that practitioners are also doing their own inner works, because without self-reflection, I do think that it's too easy to project onto a patient or attempt to fix things rather than witness the healing process and guide the healing process. It truly is sacred work to walk beside a patient and guide them in that process and really listen to what their soul is trying to tell you and honor that healing, not as an intervention or I'm going to come in and fix this, but as a sacred alchemy of psyche and soma. Because remember, your body's not betraying you with these symptoms. Your soul is trying to tell you something. So yes, rule out all of the physical root causes. I'm here for all of that. But also you need to remember to listen to something deeper. So as we finish today's episode, I want to offer some gentle invitations, some simple ways to begin integrating some of this. And you don't need to do everything. So healing is not a checklist. It's not about completing protocols, even though we might use protocols sometimes. It is a remembering, and you can just choose one place to begin. So one option would be to choose one archetype. Perhaps it's one that you've been resisting. Maybe when I was listing some of the archetypes, you heard one and you just said, no, that's not me. Nothing about me embodies that archetype. And journal with that for this week and ask what what it needs to tell you. What does your discomfort around that archetype tell you? What does that pattern mean to you historically? Maybe you begin a nervous system regulating practice, like a breathwork practice, a morning walk in silence for 10 minutes outside, or lying down at night and doing a body scan before you fall asleep with one hand on your heart and just listening to the messages your body has for you. Maybe you look through a flower essence book or go online and just read through some of the characteristics of particular flower essences and choose one that you resonate with. Don't really overthink it. Just see one that you resonate with. Maybe you're drawn to what it looks like and read some more about it and ask yourself, what does this have to do with me? What message can I get from this? And maybe share what you're going through with a trusted friend, a therapist, or a woman circle that you belong to, because our stories really do deserve a safe place to be witnessed. And remember, your story is going to follow your nervous system state. So anything that you can do this week to help regulate your nervous system and provide flexibility to your nervous system is so amazing. So if you're in one of your dark nights of the soul right now, tend your inner flame with care. It's still there. It's still burning. It's there. I promise. I have been through a lot of different transformations in my life. It's what's drawn me to this work. So remember that this is a doorway. It's a portal. Even though it might feel like an ending, and some things might end, they are certainly ending so that new things that are meant for you can begin. And if you're a practitioner, a fellow healer or therapist or space holder listening, I'm so glad that you're here as well, because you're not just treating symptoms, you are tending souls. And the nervous system, the gut, hormones, they absolutely matter, but so does your presence and your integrity, your willingness to meet someone in their descent without fixing them or rushing them, your ability to be present holding their pain without changing it or doing anything about it is really, really important. And your own healing makes you a safer vessel for that. So your own shadow work will help you hold that space and help clients navigate into wholeness in your presence. So I think it's really, really important that if you feel called to do this work more deeply, you reach out to me or someone else that can have some of those deeper conversations with you. And if you're a woman in midlife and you are struggling with a symptom, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, or you think it might be a spiritual symptom, don't just ask, how do I fix this? How do I get rid of it? How do I stop it? But ask, what is it trying to awaken in me? Because midlife is not a crisis. It is an initiation, though. And I'm so glad that you're here. If this resonated with you, please download and share with a friend. And remember that you were not ever meant to do this alone. So reach out if you need help. And until next time, thank you for being here.